This is a report on Bloomberg. Apple should consider replacing Tim Cook as CEO, Lightshed says. So the story says Apple should consider replacing Tim Cook as the iPhone maker struggles with artificial intelligence, raise significant risks for the company. Apple needs a product-focused CEO, not one centered on logistics, the two analysts said. Missing AI could fundamentally alter the company's long-term trajectory and ability to grow at all. AI will reshape industries across the global economy, and Apple risks becoming one of its casualties. It's great setting this up, right? Could NVIDIA hit $10 trillion? Because if AI is going to be as transformative as you suggested with all these various use cases, it is true Apple has been flat-footed. Is this the craziest suggestion that the Lightshed guys are making?
Well, I think the thing I would say is maybe a couple of things. First of all, I think Tim's great, and so I have a bias toward Tim. For a number of reasons, but the thing that is worth noting is how strong Apple's position is in, and that what that then equates to is their ability to watch the space and figure out the right move to make and when to make it, because whether some people like it or not, this is still the best handheld device on the planet, and it has the best set of apps on the planet, and it has your whole life kind of tied to it. So given they own that platform, their ability to lodge in AI into that at any point in the future remains very strong. And so I look at this as, if you have basically three options as a company. You could be a first mover and then totally sort of have a debacle and it not work. And we've actually seen plenty of examples in AI where the first mover is no longer the relevant player. You could have a scenario where you are a first mover that has a compounding advantage that continues to persist. Let's say OpenAI is in that category. Incredible execution and absolutely amazing. And then you have another category, which is you enter the space at a time when the architecture has sort of been figured out, when we understand the economics of the model, when you're not having to you're able to have step function levels of improvement by the time that you launch into it. And I think maybe Apple didn't purposely make that choice, but they are clearly in the position where they can actually have that choice now. And so I think you can just look at this as if this was 2004, we could have easily said, why has Apple not released a phone? And yet by 2006, that wouldn't have mattered, and they had the dominant platform that would continue to exist. I mean, Microsoft had a tablet computer in 2002 or something. I own one, or my co-founder owned one, and I owned one of their Windows smartphones made by Compaq or HP. And so think about that they had the smartphone and they had the tablet computer first, and neither of those things mattered to the long-term dominance in the space. And so Apple has a position and a potential of basically when the time is right to jump in, they still have the devices that we're using, they still have the OS that we're using, and they'll be able to have learned from all of the mistakes of various companies along the way. So I wouldn't count them out, and I think they are clearly sitting around saying, when is the right time to pull a trigger on a much bigger move? And so I think we have to just wait for that.
What do you mean much bigger move?
Well, they either have to make the decision of either train a model that gives them a state-of-the-art AI model, or do some substantial partnership or acquisition move, a la what we've seen with these kind of founder CEO hires. Obviously, the acquisition environment is complicated because of DOJ and FTC. But I would certainly be astonished if in 2 years from now there wasn't one of those choices being made. But I'm not sort of that worried that it hasn't been made yet.
So, all right, here's my galaxy brain idea. Yeah. It's one step further from the typical galaxy brain. So I've been on the show advocating for Perplexity. Maybe I've been thinking too small. Let me put it this way. Apple just lost its COO this week, Jeff Williams. Mm-hmm. And everybody thought Jeff Williams was going to be the successor to Tim Cook. Are we now in a moment of setup where Sam Altman and Jony Ive have teamed up on a device. Tim Cook is getting ready to retire in the next couple of years without a clear successor now that Williams is gone. Do we see the ultimate tech merger where OpenAI becomes for profit and Tim Cook says, Sam, Jony, pick up the legacy. They did the picture. I think they want this. Can it happen?
That is a wild that is some wild fan fiction. I mean, anything could happen. I think that should be totally in the category of options. You know, if you're being realistic, by the time that moment would likely occur, you know, OpenAI should be much bigger. That would be much more complicated than as a deal. But I like certainly as a brainstorm, it's a great way to brainstorm.
Okay, that's a very nice way to let me down. And yeah, I said merger for a reason. I wouldn't call it an acquisition. It might have to come at this point where the two just come together that way.
No, fair point. And I've seen crazier things in my life now in tech, so I can't write anything out at this point. So
okay.
Let's see what happens.
Let me put it this way as we end. I think that type of deal is far more likely than Apple buying Anthropic.
Just because it's going to require something so much more substantial, or why would that be more likely?
Because I think it's a better cultural fit. I think the Anthropic team and Apple would clash, but I think OpenAI going into Apple, could potentially work. Although OpenAI is much leakier than Apple. Although Apple leaks everything to Gurman these days. So.
The only thing I would just suggest or posit is this. It'll be fascinating to watch what Meta does with obviously its new superintelligence org because we actually already saw it with Grok, to be clear, but Meta will be a second round of this. If from a more or less standing start, they're able to accomplish, let's say, some new breakthrough state-of-the-art model in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or whatnot. I think what that will prove is basically it still remains largely a talent and compute and data game, which means that you don't really need to buy an existing incumbent. You mostly just need to decide to go big on the compute and on the training, and obviously have the right talent to do that. And the day that it doesn't really matter whether you had, all of the other prior versions to before that moment, you're doing a reset no matter what. So I would just argue that we get all excited about this idea of some big mega acquisition, but it's not a problem that requires that kind of scale, except for when you're just doing the capital expenditure of the GPUs. You really just need the right talent, the right training data, and the right compute. So I would more bet not on one of these very large multi-tens of billions of dollar deals, simply because there's other paths to get there that are not as complicated.
That's a great point. I mean, it's less about, an individual company's IP because everyone's effectively sharing the IP. It's about productizing it, right?
Well, that's exactly right. So if you imagine this industry, within 1 year, every single breakthrough idea eventually gets discovered by everybody else. Nobody has kept an advantage for more than a year on some secret idea that only they have. And so Apple's ultimate advantage is they have a distribution model that nobody else has, and they have a form factor of where AI could show up that nobody has. So they don't necessarily need to have the best model relative to 1 or 2 months being ahead of anybody else. They just need to have a good enough model that any one of our non-tech friends would just be like, this is fantastic, I love this thing, which is just does not require that scale of acquisition or whatnot.